rents for council premises that started off. What your perspective is of it is so far, following the meeting that we've had and the work that you've done so far, and then I think we'll move into questions from the committee. So over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair, and also thank you very much for moving the agenda around. Really appreciate that. Hello everyone, my name is Navdeep Mahal. I'm a senior manager working for Baker Tilly. I work as part of the internal team, and I'm also leading the review of rental and lease arrangements for non-residential property portfolio of the council. And I'm here to give you an update on how we're getting on with this review. As part of this update, there's 3 items I would like to cover. One, just to give you an outline of the scope, and secondly, just to give you an overview of some of the review procedures which we've been able to cover today, and finally moving over to the next steps and also answer any questions anyone may have. Okay, so in terms of the scope, at a very high level, our scope is to perform an independent review of the rental and lease arrangements for the non-residential property portfolio of the council. The objective is to understand if the council's policies and procedures are consistently applied and if there are any areas of inconsistency. In agreeing the scope, we really appreciate the time which we've been able to spend with the Chair to understand the current issues, and his insights were quite helpful in agreeing a scope which is focused and targeted on some of the concerns which the committee has. If anyone's got any questions, please ask. If not, I will move on to the review procedures we've been able to cover so far.
Any questions on that? Go ahead.
So, following a meeting with the Chair on the 16th of September, just to understand the current issues and challenges, we drafted our scope, and then we had a meeting with the Head of Property Services to understand the team, and also asked him to introduce us to the key members of his team. He very promptly did that, and then we had a meeting with the Head of Property Services and with Business Development Manager, and a part of that meeting was just to go over the policies and procedures the Council's got in terms of agreeing the leases and the rentals for non-residential property portfolio. Part of that meeting was we spent some of that time to go over the Manhattan database, which is used to record all the information relating to those properties. And one of the key outputs from that meeting was to obtain a list of all the lock-up retail units and industrial units, which enabled us to move on to the next stage. So we reviewed that list, and following that, we are at a stage where we've selected our sample, and over the next few days, we will be finalising that sample and requesting and put a request forward to the officers to provide us all the related lease agreements, so that we can do an extensive review and understand whether the policies are applied in agreeing the leases and the rental for those properties. Subject to access to information and officers, which inevitably we will need to spend some time with to understand any variations from the policy, we envisage that we should be in a position to draft our report probably by 6th of November. And following that, we will want to spend some time with the officers again to check the factual accuracy, and hoping to make the reports available to this committee potentially a week before your next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Can we come in with some questions now? Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Now, I've got one too. I don't know if anyone's okay. Adele.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, so could I just clarify the purpose of doing this? So basically, what are you going to do with the information when you've got it?
Yes, absolutely. So, like I said, so far we've been able to, the council officers, they've given us of policies and procedures. So that's the starting point in terms of when there's a lease or lease agreement which is due for renewal. That's how the council go about determining the leases and the rental. Once we get the information, when I say information, what I'm alluding to is actually the detailed lease agreements. So we will look to see whether the lease, for example, those leases and rentals, they will determine in line with the market rate. And we will not just look at what's contained in the lease agreements, we will also look to see what was behind that, and also try and understand how the decisions are arrived. We're also looking for transparency around the decisions, so that is the process which we will follow. Having said that, because we have selected an initial sample of 10 items, just to understand the type of document which we want to be given for each of the property, we are hoping that we will get that by the end of this week. Once we receive that, we will be able to design detailed procedures and discuss that with the chair of the committee to make sure that that is consistent and addresses some of the concerns which this committee had. But it's very high level, that's how we anticipate going to the next stage.
I should explain, actually, I should have done it at the start of the item, that the reason, I'll come back to you in a second, the reason we're looking into this particular issue is because the council obviously has numerous agreements on rental for commercial properties across the whole of the borough. I think it's in the region of about 2,000, just over 2,000. So the council's policy is to move away from having subsidised rents for organisations the council might want to support, such as voluntary sector organisations and charities, and to put everybody on a kind of market rent basis. Now, during that period of transition, there's been a lot of uncertainty because obviously market conditions have changed, etc., etc., etc. And what we want to do is get a really thorough understanding of whether or not proper procedures are being followed, and also whether or not there are some real aberrations out there, because there may be commercial businesses paying peppercorn rents. We don't know that for a fact. There may be, there may not. And if that kind of thing is still happening, we want to identify that and have it dealt with as quickly as possible. So that's the kind of thing we'll be looking at. There may be other anomalies that this audit may throw up. So just to give a bit of context for this discussion, Adele, back to you.
Yeah, no. So thank you, Chair. Because obviously I'm not don't normally come to these meetings. I just wanted to clarify what I think you have both said, which is the aim is to get everybody on market rent. Is that have I understood that correctly?
I think the aim of the review is to understand if the council's policy, which is to make sure that all the agreements are on the market rate. So the aim is to understand if that is the case, and if it isn't the case, then understand why it isn't the case. And then obviously one of the things which will be followed from the report is the next steps, i.e. the recommendations.
Okay.
Yeah, so in that sense, Adele, it's about making sure that the policy is fairly and equitably applied. Yeah. It may be, but it may not be at the moment, and showing that that's the case.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much, and really welcome the piece of work. And I mean, I think my concern is also that at the end of the process, all this stuff is open and transparent. And I understand we're having to do it in this way, where you go off and look at this stuff. But actually, we need a system where, to make sure that the system's being done fairly, you don't have to employ somebody to go and look at it and come back and tell you. So I think there is a wider piece that comes out of this as well, which is how we can have a system going forward that anybody in this borough knows what rent is being paid on a particular place, and that's being fairly done. And I think we ought to be pushing for that as a matter of course. One of my big concerns that businesses, for example, in the Blue, which is Southwark Park Road, it's kind of a local shopping area for my ward, the big issue there that the businesses raise with me is that Iceland or Co-op or the Tesco, they can sign long leases and get cheap rents because they're committing for a longer period of time. If you're running an independent shop, you can't commit for that long, and therefore you end up with a worse deal because you're signing up for shorter. Those sort of differences make people feel they're being treated less fairly than Tesco, even though Tesco could quite easily cover the bills. So there has to be something in this piece of work that looks at that issue about the length of leases and about how we can actually support a fairness that doesn't just take account of how, which company's got the best lawyers or which company can sign up for the longer lease. And that's obviously where the council is a different sort of landlord than another sort of private landlord, that the council actually has a duty to think about those things. So hopefully in your piece of work you could look at that particular point about why people get the leases they do and the length of time they're signed up for.
I think in selecting a sample, we've certainly looked, so we've got criteria, and one of the criteria is to understand why, for example, two shops on the same high street are paying slightly different rent.
Exactly, yeah.
So we will be trying to understand the drivers behind why the terms of the leases are different.
And getting a system out of it that's fairer. I mean, that kind of. Will you make recommendations about that?
I think we will make recommendations as far as the policy is concerned. So in terms of the policy, if then I suppose if the point we're making is that maybe there is something which needs to be, if the policy needs to be amended, then we will not necessarily make a recommendation, because our scope is to look at what's been done and whether and ensure if the policy has been consistently applied. If that makes sense.
I think on the some of the points which you've made about transparency and fairness. You know, if for obvious reasons an auditor would be a more technical set of recommendations. But that audit is not our report.
No.
The audit will be given to us, and that will then form part of the report, and we will make the recommendations as a committee. So then we will be able to have a debate around this table about what those recommendations would be, including the issues that you...
Will we get back to the problem of needing legal advice to say whether we can publish this stuff? I mean, I assume the auditors can't offer us any advice about that point, and whether we need to get some external advice about what, because otherwise we're back at square one where we started, which is this information should be in the public domain. It isn't. People therefore speculate that things aren't being done fairly. You may then be convinced by this piece of work that things are being done fairly, but we haven't solved the underlying problem of openness and transparency.
Well, I would say our recommendations, our report will be written in such a way that it will be a public document. One of those recommendations, or several of those recommendations to the Cabinet, may be that we need to, as a council, change our policies in order to become much more transparent on this particular issue. So the piece of work that we're going to produce, including the report, if there are bits of it that need to be redacted because of legal advice, you know, we'll have to take that advice at the time and cross that bridge when we get to it. Any other questions at this stage? No. Okay. Well, I think that's covered the issues that I wanted to ask about as well, Manpreet. So thank you for coming this evening and updating us, and we'll look forward to the next meeting as well, where we get a further update.
Thanks
Thank you.
very much.
Cheers.
Thanks for your time.